Welcome to the channel. My name is Saul, the creator of the Summoner's Nexus TCG, an indie digital trading card game that should hopefully be with you soon. Now, in the lead up to this game's release, we've been working on it for like 3 years. I wanted to start sharing some of the lore, the card details, and the card design elements that have gone into the game so far. Now, I have in my hands an in-progress build of the game, and I'm going to use it to show off some of the cards that we have on offer, specifically the Aria subset. If you are into trading card games or digital games in general, please consider subscribing so you can stay up to date on development of this game as it continues. Join our Discord community linked down below so you can find out how to find matches, learn more about the game, and leave a like so that more people find the channel and more people become players that you can play against. So, the Aria subset. This is a minor family of cards in the Summoner's Nexus TCG. Now, cards are broken into families called major subsets or minor subsets. When building a deck, you have to worry about this thing called the synergy system, where if a card has a very high synergy rating, then it makes it so that you can only build certain types of decks with it. Basically, you have 10 spaces in your deck for avatars, and the higher a card synergy rating is from 2 to, well, 10, that restricts how many cards you can put in the deck with it. So if I have a synergy rating of 8, then that means 8 of the cards in your deck have to be from my subset if you want to be able to use my effects, and you only have room for 2 other cards that are outside of my subset. Now, that is an extreme example. Most major subsets have synergy ratings around like 6, 7, 8, so on and so forth. But the minor subsets were created specifically to give you more deck building flexibility, variety, and options. Since you can't mix major subsets together most of the time, the minor subsets exist to help fill those gaps so you don't have to just use generic cards that don't have synergy ratings. The Aria subset specifically is a middle of the road minor subset because it only has 3 cards, which is what I'm tending to find is the average for these kinds of decks. Now, some of them end up having like in the range of 5, some of them may have like 2 potentially, but 3 tends to be the average, at least in the current build of the game. Now, fun fact, if you actually look at these cards and their card art, you see that in the blurb for it, this is a deck that was co-designed by a member of the community. So when I was initially creating the Summoner's Nexus TCG, I was looking, 1, to get like more hands on deck, and also 2, for early support. And so you find that a lot of early supporters had the opportunity to design actual subsets or co-design them in this case, because I would go over whatever they suggested or created and then refine it and like tweak it so it actually fit within the meta. Luxus was a member of the actual core team, so he designed, I believe, 2 or 3 subsets alongside me. So in this instance, he wanted a waifu subset. He wanted girls. He wanted girls in the trading card game because that's just how he is. And so he created this subset, and I helped to tweak it and get it down to like the finer essentials of what it ended up becoming. Now, in terms of the art direction for these cards, this is one of the earlier decks, which means that it's from the time period where I was buying Unity assets because I wanted to make a 3D trading card game. So I would buy an asset, license it, and then make art based on that asset. So these cards are from that period. So they're based on a 3D asset, but ended up looking actually quite different to it. Like if you see them side by side, you could probably recognize it, but they're different enough to be their own thing. So when Luxus wanted to build a deck and he wanted it to involve waifus, we looked through the assets that we had, and he chose the one that allowed him to create a deck of 3 magical musical sisters. That is genuinely all there is to it when it comes to art design. I mean, I really do like the backgrounds for these cards. What I tend to do with the backgrounds for any of the cards that we do is like try and use them for other things and promotion, but the way that these backgrounds are done, they only really work with the cards themselves for the most part, because of the way like the light for the horizon behind them is. If you take them out as a centerpiece of these images, it just looks like a weirdly color graded photo. So it looks really good when they're in it because they are like coming out of the light or like they are the centerpiece of it, but it doesn't really work for anything else. So that is a fun fact about the Aria subset, I guess. Now for what the deck actually does. So Luxus had the idea for them to be like a sequential based deck where they're singing a song, and one card starts a song, the other card carries the song on, and the third card finishes the song off. And I genuinely don't remember if it was him or me that added a turn system to it, where what this deck does is you summon one of the cards on turn 1, it starts the song, you summon another card on turn 2, it continues it, and then the third monster concludes the song on turn 3. Now, mechanically, that is really cool to me. I think I was thinking more about mechanics and viability when I created this. And in truth, no one really used this initially. Like no one, like everyone saw it, it was like balanced, okay, that's cool, you know, they make a fun song, everything awesome, but for similar reasons to the Daemon subset in testing, no one was really keen on playing this deck. And the reason is the way that the hand system in this game works. Now you choose what cards go into your starting hand, 5 avatars and 5 runes. Your opponent does the same, so you tend to want to bring your A game. Now the minor subsets are made to support the major subsets, so you don't want them to overshadow your major subset in your starting hand. But the problem with the Arya subset, similar to the Daemons, is they just demand that you give up a good chunk of your opening hand, more than that deck actually, and that's because of the turn system, right? The way that their effect works. So on turn 1, you need to play Aurora of the Arya, right? You need to play her, which makes sense. She's starting off the song, and it only takes up 1 of your 3 summons for turn 1. Awesome. But on turn 2, you must play Merides or the song falls apart, right? Her effect that allows the song to carry on specifically states it can only be activated on the 2nd turn of the contest, which means that you either have to risk drawing her on turn 2 from your resource deck out of the 5 random cards that you can draw, or she takes up a 2nd of the 5 slots in your hand, meaning that they've already taken 2 of those 5 slots, and then you have Vespra coming along at the end, and she can only activate her effect on turn 3. So again, do you risk drawing her off the top of your resource deck, or do you give the Arya subset 3 of the 5 slots in your opening hand, knowing that you won't be able to summon all of them at once? It's not as if like you have the 3 of them and you can play them all out on turn 1. No, you have to go turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, which, I mean, most decks just cannot afford to have you do that, right? Most decks need you to be able to like do things with the core subset that is your main strategy. And so for a long time, this deck didn't really see play. I was okay with that because I'm like, okay, this is the kind of deck that was created with the mindset of this might not be good right now, but someone will come along that makes this really, really viable. And when that happens, it'll be really, really cool. Little did I know that the something that made it viable was already in the game. It's just no one had thought to do it yet. And I found it so funny because it was actually Seluxus who ended up realizing that this deck was broken, right? It was part of a tier 0 strategy effectively. And in fairness, it wasn't this deck itself that was broken. It was the fact that it could be mixed with a deck, and the, I would say, relatively balanced boosts that this deck gave to the deck it's supporting broke that other deck. So this deck could be mixed in with the Ancient Beast monsters. I will just pull them up over here real quick. Right, so it can be mixed in with the Ancient Beast monsters because they have a synergy rating of 4. So you can have 4 of the Ancient Beasts, the 3 Arias, and you still have room for math, 3 more cards, right? So what you would do is you only, with the Ancient Beasts, they're not the kind of deck that need to like combo off of each other. They all have independent effects that are really, really good. They're meant to stand alone. They work well together, obviously, but they can work independently. So what you would do is you would just take 2 of them, right? Just any 2 of them in your opening hand, and you use them to start off the strategy. And what this deck does is it says, okay, so when she's summoned, she makes it so that all of your Arya monsters gain attack when they're summoned. When she's summoned, she makes it so that you can either gain life points or fortify any Arya monster that gets summoned, which, okay, you think this is awesome. The Arya subset is making it so that, you know, when Merides hits when Vespra hits the field, she's going to be really big, she's going to be really tanky, but that's not it, because when Vespra is summoned, she has the effect of saying the next card that you summon is inducted into the Arya subset. So she herself gets fortified, she gets the attack boost, that's all good and dandy, but what she's really there for is to make it so that whatever subset you're playing on turn 4 gains all of the benefits of the Arya subset that you have built up over the course of the contest, right? They benefit from the song that was sung. It's like a battle chant for them. And so what you do is you just maintain your resources, because the whole thing with the Ancient Beast subset is that they destroy your opponent's cards in order to generate tokens that have the same stats as your opponent's cards. So you make up for not having all of the cards that would have been in your starting hand by destroying your opponent's cards, generating tokens. But more specifically, if you play these cards in the counter zone, or if you played them in the counter zone, your opponent would have to attack into them to get through, and just eventually you are going to whittle them down enough in their offensive pursuit that you end up destroying their monsters and generating tokens that you use for additional defense. And so the strategy here was just to create a wall that your opponent would never be able to get through. That was the whole plan, is just bodies on top of bodies, and when one body falls, it gets replaced by a token, or you summon another thing, and then on turn 4, you summon a fortified, buffed up ancient beast monster that just either wreaks havoc offensively, or again, bolsters your defense to the point where they will never get through. Like, we tested it against every single deck in the metagame, and nothing could beat it, so we ended up having to nerf the ancient beast monsters. I opted not to nerf the Arias too heavily. I mean, they were already nerfed in that none of them really have stats. Their stats are all, because they benefit from the boost that Aurora gives them at the beginning. Now, I did sort of tweak the boost that she gives. I think she used to give them 150, but now she gives them 100. But I didn't want to nerf the deck itself too significantly because they weren't really the culprit. Like, this was the first ever chance that they had to shine. I thought that the defensive pressure from the Ancient Beast subset was just being taken a step too far by their involvement with this deck. So that was the only real difficulty when it came to balancing it, was the fact that it went from being almost irrelevant, right, almost unplayable, to breaking the whole game. So yeah, now it is still playable. That strategy still works. It's just not as oppressive. There are ways around it, basically. And you have to play, well, actually it doesn't work perfectly because you can't use it as defensively. There is still some defense to it, but you can still use it. It's just in a different format. It's wearing a different skin now. In truth, that is the only real thing that the Aria subset has ever been like a part of. They aren't like, yeah, they're a minor subset, and they're not like anyone's favorite minor subset unless you're Sluxus, because, you know. So design-wise, they were also one of the few subsets to end up getting a comic done for them, because when coming up with the lore, Sluxus was tasked with, okay, can you think of any lore? He wrote a story that I didn't exactly jive with, so I rewrote and just I redid the story and turned it into a comic. And it ended up being quite interesting in my opinion. So they're one of the first decks in the game to have like a story mode feature for them in the lore section, so that'll be really fun. And the story for them is actually what has made me like them a lot more, because once you've written a story for a card, it has a lot more personality, and I really like the story that's told for this deck. I feel like you'll enjoy it as well once the game is finally out. With that being said, that is genuinely everything that there is to say about the Aria subset, because that is the only time where they've been relevant in the game's lifespan throughout its development. So if you enjoyed this or want to learn more about any of the other decks, consider subscribing once again, joining the Discord link down below, and please leave a like on the video because it helps us out a lot. Thank you very much for your time, and have a wonderful day.